There's a weathered old peach tree that grows in my front yard. I don't know how old it is, but I would guess it's much older than I am. Its limbs are scarred, its shape is twisted, and it doesn't look like much during the winter months. But every year in late January, new life emerges. The peach tree works tirelessly through the spring, producing far too many peaches for its modest limbs to support, the vast majority of which are too small to eat. Even so, I do my best to take care of this tree, watering it, pruning it, and picking up the spoiled fruit. This simple peach tree is one of my few reminders of the seasons here in San Diego. Every year when the pink blossoms appear, I make my way to Death Valley. When the fruit is nearly ripe, I backpack into the canyons of southern Utah. And I return to Zion each autumn when the tips of the leaves show just the faintest hint of color. It's now early March, and the blossoms have come and gone, replaced by a lush canopy of green. Hidden among the leafy branches is yet another crop of miniature peaches. New life and a new beginning. It was toward the end of my visit to Zion this past winter when the COVID restrictions were eased. Campgrounds in Death Valley reopened, and with a successful trip to Zion under my belt, I was excited to return to the desert, albeit 2 months later than usual. The temperatures in March are still quite mild, but the heat of summer will soon arrive. Week by week, the temperatures will rise, hinting at what's to come in the summer months ahead. Along with this trip comes a new perspective, one earned from my successful winter trip to Zion, my newfound career, and the prospect of pointing my camera at sand and rocks over the next week or so. Death Valley requires patience, it requires respect, and it's quick to break those who remain inflexible. I've learned to adapt through the years and to work with the conditions rather than trying to force them. Of all my visits to Death Valley through the years, this was the first where I truly felt at peace with my surroundings. This is a story of my March of 2021 visit to Death Valley National Park.
Well, I've arrived here in Death Valley, and it's interesting because on the way in the skies were mostly sunny, but then I saw some clouds starting to creep over the Panamint Range, and now the skies are mostly cloudy, but these are the sort of clouds that could be quite interesting at sunset. And I was talking to my wife when I was getting set up at my campsite, and she said it was raining back home in San Diego. So the storm's going to miss us here, but it's definitely going to give us some interesting clouds. So on the way in, I found some interesting areas I'm scouting out right now, and I already found a possible location, possible composition. But that probably won't be the best for today. One of the possible compositions faces that way, but what I find is that whenever there's storms coming in and clouds and stuff, your best opportunities in Death Valley are going to be all the way up the valley or all the way down the valley. That's where the really nice light happens. So I have another location in mind. The only problem is it tends to be really windy. I don't know if there's going to be much wind with this storm, but if there is, that would make it tough to shoot. But it's only noon right now, so got plenty of time to scout around and see what happens with the clouds and come up with a plan. Well, several hours have passed, and I've come to the location of the up the valley shot. And so this is what it looks like here. You got all these really cool rocks here. They're spilling out here, a little bit of a coarse sand that they're embedded in. Then you have a long view up the valley. And I have my camera set up. So I got my 240 millimeter lens, which is equivalent to about a 35 millimeter. And just crafted a composition that's about half sky and half rocks in the foreground. And it was actually a little trickier composition than I thought, because I'm trying to balance all these rocks in the foreground and all the other elements, but I think I have something that works pretty decent. But I do have a grad filter holder on there, and so that will be necessary if we get any good light. And that's the thing. Right now, it's mostly overcast. It's only about 2:30, and the skies are not super promising looking, but here in Death Valley, there's two things that usually happen as we get closer to sunset. One is that the clouds will build in, and then the other is that they pretty much evaporate. And there's a tiny hint of blue up in there, so we'll see how it turns out. I was just swapping some messages with my wife on my satellite messenger, and she said it's absolutely pouring at home right now, so just getting a little bit of clouds here in the desert. But I look forward to seeing what happens with the light. I have a lot of time to kill. The sun is still really high in the sky, but I think it's time to find a nice rock to sit on and just relax a little bit. Well, it's a little after 4 o'clock, and I gotta say the conditions are getting a little better. Earlier there were some lower clouds that are getting spun up by the mountains there, and those are sort of clouds that will sometimes build in after sunset and just snuff out all the light. So I'm glad to see that those are dissipating, and now we have just these higher clouds, and these are the ones that could potentially catch a little bit of light at sunset, and so we'll see how that goes. But I've moved my camera end a little bit. I had it about 10 feet back earlier. I've been moving it around because I just wasn't quite 100% satisfied with the previous composition. I'm using a new tool on this trip. This was recommended to me by my friend Michael Strickland, and it's called the Artist View Catcher. It'll be linked to down below. But it's a really simple device with some different aspect ratios set in there, and you just hold it up, and it's just a way of putting a rectangle on a scene, and to simulate different focal lengths, you just move it closer or further. And after a while, especially if you know your lenses pretty well, it's pretty easy to get a hang of. But I was able to find a composition that works pretty decent. I have a 2-stop soft grad placed. I have my up the valley view, where hopefully the sun might be able to get in underneath these clouds, light them up a little bit. But also sometimes it's the blue hour shots that look a little bit better. The crazy sky on fire, I doubt that's going to happen, but sometimes that could be a little overwhelming, and maybe more of a somber atmospherics might be kind of nice for the scene. But the wind has remained calm, which is nice. And another hour or so until sunset. We'll see what happens. So I've exposed a sheet of Velvia 50 and a sheet of Provia 100. And it's still probably about 20 minutes to sunset, but I'm liking the texture in the sky and getting that light low on the valley floor there. And just like I was saying earlier, whenever you have these clouds in Death Valley, it's your view up valley as well as down valley that usually have the interesting light. And this is definitely more in the experimental category. We'll see how the composition looks and how the light looks, but now that I have my safety shots down, the next is going to be to wait for something different to happen, whether it lights up in a different way. It looks like the clouds are clearing out a little bit, so we'll see on that. But 2 shots done, it's pretty good, and we'll just wait and see what happens. sun has set and the wind sure has picked up here. I'm really glad I was able to expose the sheet of Provia and Velvia, because a little earlier the light was pretty good too. There was some nice light low in the valley floor there, and the wind was reasonably calm. So that light's gone away, and also the clouds are starting to dissipate. So just like I mentioned earlier, over here in Death Valley, usually the clouds will either dissipate or they'll build in when you get towards sunset. So today is more of a dissipate day. Man, this wind is strong. So I got my camera all tied down here, so it's decently secure. But definitely happy to have exposed some film. Now it's time to get my camera packed up, get back to camp, make myself some tasty dinner. Feels pretty good to expose some film.
Death Valley is a land of contrast, one of absolute silence and unrelenting wind. There is very little between the two, and though it can be frustrating at times, I've learned to embrace the conditions rather than fight them. I'm glad I exposed those 2 sheets of film before the wind arrived. This first sheet is Velvia 50, and the second is Provia 100F. They're both well exposed and the grad filter is well placed, though I prefer the overall look and feel of Provia. As landscape photographers, we often strive to capture fleeting moments when the sky is set ablaze, but it's the quiet and unassuming moments that often have more to say. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you around next time. If you enjoy this ad-free and clickbait-free content and want to help me live my dream, a voluntary contribution of just $24 a year helps keep my gas tank full and my film freezer stocked. For more information on how to support me and my work, please visit the donation section of my website at benhorn.com/donate. I also have prints and my portfolio box set available on my website. You can find a direct link down below in the show notes. Thanks in advance for your support.